Bike Safety Podcast with Vance and Bart.
It's a trap. There's no comfort fitting in a fake safety that no one believes in.
Are we live?
We are live. We're
Okay.
live. I'm alive. You're alive. We're alive.
Some kind of alive. So, I've been thinking a lot about companies this week. I've had a handful of companies that I work with mention some kind of novelty or pioneering in whatever space they are in. And it got me thinking, when is a company a monopoly? So here's how I see it.
Okay.
All companies start as a monopoly.
Okay.
We talk a lot about not the game Monopoly, but companies that have a
Well,
monopoly.
outside the
right?
podcast, we do.
That's the
pretty-
other podcast.
It's pretty much exclusively Monopoly talk, the game. But yeah.
But on this one, we talk
Right.
about the other kind, which
Right.
I think as a term just gets lobbed around. The idea that if you're sort of big in your space and kind of the best, and
It does on the left, but it does not get talked about at all on the right. And I wonder why that is. I actually know why that is. I'm just throwing that out there for people to start thinking about it. We'll
Yeah,
come back.
let's
Circle back to that.
yeah, let's put a pin in that one. Let's put that in the parking lot.
That's right.
So a lot of companies start as competition to some other company, but if you are doing good work and actually pioneering in a space, creating new technologies, new methods, new processes, then you are inherently, at that moment at least, the only one doing that and the only one offering that.
That is true.
I don't think we know what we're talking about when we talk about monopolies. Because, again, I'll go back to my initial statement, which I tend to believe, is that many companies start as monopolies. And that's a good thing.
I would agree in the sense that we're defining the word monopoly as X, but I tend to add a little bit to the definition of monopoly, and it's to better define what it is. And I think probably because of the world we live in, it requires a little bit more definition. And I like to make sure that people understand this, is that it's not that I'm the only one who makes my product or whatever, but there are active barriers put in place for you to get in to compete with me. It's not a matter of you have the same capital, enough capital to build the machine, and the knowledge to do the exact same thing. It's that you have to have this, or I have a patent. So yes, you have everything. You're able to, but you're not allowed to. There's somebody with a gun who's going to stop you. So that's where I feel like monopoly, at least in the modern sense, is.
Well, and that's partially why I bring it up, because I do hear that word a lot.
Because we have a lot of them. They're created by government. It cannot exist without government.
Well, see, I don't think that's true. I think it can exist without government. I think that
See, a monopoly in the original definition there is protections to where it cannot be. The whole point of the monopoly is that it can be competed with. So, yes, you may be the only one for a little while, but just because you're not competed with doesn't mean that you can't be competed with.
But that's kind of the point. Those barriers are sometimes natural or out of sheer luck and aren't always at the behest of the state.
So you're saying like not everybody's equal in, like, everybody who wants to start a business isn't necessarily on an equal playing field with the person who's already started a successful business.
Take as an example certain latitude lines.
Okay.
There are certain latitude lines that have a monopoly on avocado farms.
Okay.
Now, it's not because people in the Arctic Circle have less capital or less motive or less profit incentive
Okay.
or less know-how, less operational skill, less agricultural skill.
So, all right. So monopoly, it can be used in that sense. I mean, I guess if it's a definition, but like at that point, you're just using monopoly to describe nature.
I'm using that as an extreme example, of course, but
You are.
I'm
But
using that
we
to demonstrate
could
the
break
fact
that
that
down too, to the point that like somebody, let's say there's a person with a mind that just has thought up just even a philosophy, a way of structuring education that nobody else's mind can even fathom. It's just so amazing, right? They have the monopoly on that thought, right? I guess if you want to use monopoly in that sense.
right.
So yeah, but that's still nature. Their mind naturally did that. It's a nature thing. So
And that's what I'm saying is like in your mind,
Mhm.
you are so deep into, let's just call it anarcho-capitalism and like a libertarian movement, that
philosophy in general, like social philosophy.
that
Yes, I follow that a lot.
that the lens through which you see things is a pretty strong binary of government bad. And I think that is
Force
That's fair
to
enough.
be like, yeah, because it's really not government. It just happens to be that government uses
And
the most force.
and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But if we can move past that foregone conclusion that those barriers are bad, if we can say, okay, we all agree there,
Okay.
I think we can try and better understand what we're talking about when we're talking about monopolies. Because
So
if you
are we
think-
talking about a language issue? Because like I read something. We're talking about how the Catholic Church uses Latin still, and a lot of people are upset, including the Pope. Is a dead language, blah blah blah. But the person speaking about it, I cannot remember who it was, made a great point that Latin is no longer used in like everyday speech. So it's actually the perfect language to be used in a religious atmosphere or whatever, because it doesn't change. The meaning of the words don't change as the culture of that place changes, because the language is so-called dead, right? And I think that's a great point, is because you can manipulate the masses by manipulating what the words mean.
And I think that's part of it here. We'll call it half of it here.
Right.
Because I'm, and if you can go find that article, please send it to me, because that does sound interesting.
Well, Noam
I
Chomsky wrote an entire book about it, which is referenced a lot in the same talk that I heard, and I cannot remember who gave the talk. But if I can find it, I will reference it to you. And but Noam Chomsky has a whole book about it. So, and there's a lot of especially your anarcho leftists, your good ones at least, that were really into the fact that language is a tool that's used by government. They or powerful people change the meaning of the word to change, because you as a parent teach, okay, let's freedom. Remember, you like the word freedom, but freedom's been taken, right? We talked about that, me and you. But your parents taught you the meaning of the word freedom. It meant this. It meant something. This feeling inside of you got from the word and the meaning that you had. But if you keep telling your kid that freedom's good, but then somebody else at the public school teaches them that freedom is something different. Freedom is you being able to have the same amount of money to start a business as somebody else, because it's something they do, right? Then your understanding of what your dad was telling you was good is skewed a little bit at a time, right? So now your idea of freedom is something different, but because your dad said it was good, and you have these wonderful feelings about it from at a younger age, unless you get into the real philosophy of it, you're just going with it. You're just,
Or conversely, you're taught that the word freedom is bad. Because I promise you, if you go onto a college campus and you have a sticker on your vehicle that says just the word freedom, a good majority of the folks there will assume you are part of that thing that we got lumped into, the MAGA crowd, because freedom was simultaneously changed as a definition, like you say, but then also turned into this thing that everyone claims is like a racist dog whistle or something like that. But again, if you can find that thing about the Latin thing, that's great. I would love to read that. We'll put that in the show notes for anybody who's curious about it. But I think that's only part of it.
Okay.
I do think it is a reason why we can't quite get to a resolution for a lot of these things, because we are talking about different things. And that's why I see this as almost a two-phase problem to be solved, is what are we talking about when we talk about monopolies? And if we can all get on the same page there, are monopolies inherently good or bad? Is there a value judgment to be had on them?
So in a true free market, everything that I've read, they can't truly exist. Like, they do exist for short periods of time under some definitions of monopoly, but they can't truly exist, because if you were without the power of the state, without laws, without even Like in the case of slavery, basically, uh, like subsidies, because they were subsidizing the enslavement part to the masses, so the rich people could still have slaves, because the cost of catching a slave that ran away, finding a slave, and if you had to pay the money to find a slave and catch them again, you would have to pay. The cost of that would be incredible. So therefore, the cost of housing slaves, to the extent that they wouldn't be able to run away, would have gone up. And that was all subsidized by there being a police force that everybody had to pay for. So all the poor people had to pay for. This is how monopolies exist. It's not. It's because there's something in the way. Because if there's not something in the way, yes, a monopoly in some definitions can't exist. I only have avocados here because that's the way the climate is, right? But that doesn't mean that if the price of avocados gets up high enough, because I'm the only one with avocados, and people are still buying them at, $50 an avocado. I'm going to go to 51. At some point, somebody goes, I've designed and can afford an artificial climate. And I can grow avocados and sell them for $30 a pop and undercut the guy who's got the avocado field.
But you've already skipped a bunch of steps here, though. You're talking about a lot of things have to happen. A lot of time has passed. Like,
yes,
again,
things
going
don't
back
happen instantly. That's right.
Yeah, so what you're describing is something that is maybe an eventuality, but also our entire solar system expanding into nothingness and all of us catching on fire is an eventuality. Like, nothing matters. I just want to make sure that we're being intellectually honest with the task at hand, in that if we're talking about people changing language and manipulating language, I think we should make sure that we're not doing the same. Because when we're talking about a monopoly, we're not saying, oh, a monopoly, you mean something that inherently lasts forever? No, I don't think that's it. I'm just saying that in a certain moment, however long that happens to last, that is a monopoly. Because you could argue the same with government, right? Like, the state doesn't have it forever.
That's a good point. It's a good point. It's just that a monopoly under a free market can change at the moment of somebody coming up with a better idea or a way around it, right? But a monopoly with government and force can stop that person with a better idea from competing in the same market. So I'm not sitting here saying that free markets are perfect, and I've made this point before, but I am saying that, like, a free market can't continue to exist forever in a a monopoly can't continue to exist in a free market. But as long as there's a government powerful enough to force you not to compete with a business, that monopoly can exist, no matter how many good ideas you come up with.
But you're still describing the same thing. The mechanics are different. I agree. I'll grant you that. The mechanics are different and the time horizons might be different. But effectively, they're the same. And I just don't want us to get caught up on...
I just don't think they are. I just don't agree that a human force stopping a good idea is the same thing is like you having the idea first in that little time period that you own it. before anybody else can.
Then maybe this semantic conversation is even more important than I had posed it as. Is you're saying that a monopoly by definition means something that's stopped and is the only thing that can do whatever that is by force of...
By force. There has to be force involved. Yes.
Okay, so then we clearly are at odds from a semantic perspective. So let's talk about what that other thing is that by way of force a government can put in place, or by chance or other forces in nature happen in a free market. What would you call that thing?
That would be cornering the market. You cornered it before anybody else. That's being a good entrepreneur to jump into a market that other people are so far away from that you're going to have a period of time where you're the only one supplying it. And don't forget, we're in a free market here, that nobody's forcing you to have this product. It is providing a service or a good beyond the value of what you're going to charge for it.
Okay, so we'll call it cornering the market or having majority market share.
Okay.
So that we're not caught up on the word monopoly, right? Some businesses start as a response to other businesses, right? They want to go disrupt an industry, go take a percentage of market share, do something a different way. And then there are some businesses...
Customer service is a little better, whatever.
Sure.
All kinds of, you can tweak it, yeah.
And then there are some businesses who want to create an industry. They want to create a vertical that they can go into. So they're not about disrupting a space that's already there. They're about creating one.
Right.
And both are just as valid, and it's all part of the cycle.
Very valuable. But they both need to exist, yes.
Right. It's a cyclical movement of someone creating and then others improving. It's the reason why Apple, which we could talk about in 3 whole episodes, have found that sweet spot where they are a bit pioneer and a bit refinement, because they do things that other folks have not done, but just different enough where your average person can accept it. And I don't know if they've run out of inertia from Steve's time there or not, but at least during their heyday, that's what they were.
Yeah, there's an argument for that. I would have to. If being an Apple iPod guy, fanboy, I would have to say I'm not seeing the sparkle I used to see. But yeah, I still have some Apple shit. I'm not gonna lie.
We're also getting older, so the things
Good
that
stuff.
are trending aren't necessarily as much on our radar anymore. But
Right.
that's neither here nor there. So there is this cyclical piece of creating new industries and then improving already existing industries. So that segment of folks who are going out and creating new industries, creating new tools, new products, new services, by the very
typically that's higher risk type investments, which also reap higher rewards at the moment, right? Yeah.
Yep, true.
Because you're not going to invest higher risk if the reward is just as good as if you're just doing a disruptive type business. Where I just come in, I'm just a little better at the same shit you're doing. Because the risk is the same.
Right. So that becomes an incentive that motivates a certain kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And
a
when
disincentive also that pushes away other people.
Sure.
Very important part of that.
So when they start that business, they have inherently cornered the market. They have 100% market share because the market did not exist prior to that business.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the people that I talk to,
Did they take a loan out?
I don't think that's relevant because this applies to both.
It is relevant because of artificial interest rates. Because
in this thought experiment, it doesn't.
Okay.
I'd say in this experiment, it doesn't matter as much, but
it matters to real people, though. It does.
Okay, well, let's take two.
Because two of these people have the same great idea. One can go get this amazing interest rate from the big bank because they have their connections and whatnot, and the other one can't. The same idea. That is a artificial interest rate. So it is a forced interest rate created by a gun, okay? And it is saying that one person can do it and the other person can't.
We don't need this experiment to show us that's a problem, right?
Okay. Well,
I think
it was good enough to mention it then.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's fair, but as we slip back more and more into the state piece of this, it kind of breaks apart our.
You know me.
Everything's a nail, right?
Yeah, you got to hit it.
But I want to make sure that these problems aren't going to exist beyond that. Because if we solve the number one problem...
Well, they are going to exist. Don't think that if... And that's something that we don't need to tell people either, is that the free market and anarchism, whatever, is not going to be, the world's not going to be, all unicorn farts. You know what I mean? It's bad things are going to happen. Bad people are still going to exist. And all these evil incentives, there's going to be a lot of them still out there. But the big one, the one that makes all of us have to go along with it, won't be there anymore. So we will be able to fight back. That's the thing. It will be better. The world will be better if there's not some evil person, not even evil, if there's not just some person above us telling us we all have to go this way. Because even if that person's not evil, they can't know everything. That's the calculation problem of socialism. It's a lot of economists, even I would say the majority of credible economists, have accepted the calculation problem with central planning. So,
but I think you're preaching to the choir a little bit on that, because even people who disagree with us a bit will understand that. And I think they're trying to get to that next level. I don't think it's about us overselling, and that's kind of what it feels like right now. It feels like we're overselling this thing where, like, at every turn, the only reason this is a problem is the state. The only reason this is a problem is the state. And I think things would drastically be improved.
You're right.
But
and that's my point, is like, it's not bad. It's not solved because the state doesn't exist. It's just, it can be fixed on such an easier level. Like, every time that there's an imbalance, it can be fixed easier. Less people can be negatively affected by that imbalance, is what I'm saying. Because there isn't a overwhelming entity with guns forcing you to go along with it. That's what I'm saying. It's not perfect. Bad people still exist, yet it's better.
And that's why I want us to clear these things up and not oversell. Because when you say things like there are no monopolies without the state, people hear that and think, okay, the state goes away. What he's proposing is that all this other stuff goes with it. But they're not talking about monopoly. They're talking about cornering the market, which is why I want us to get specific into this. Because
specifically, you're right. And then a lot of people are thinking about what today's market looks like, which isn't a free market. So let's say you left everything the same. Amazon still had all the money and power they have. All the companies, Apple, has all the money and power they have right now. And then you take all regulations away. Okay? In most people's minds, those companies take over the fucking world. They're, but in what really happens is a panic sets in. What do the people really want? Because the state now isn't dictating, and anybody can do whatever. Of course, they're not going to be able to compete with us on that magnitude at this point. Social media works on a magnitude scale pretty. It's the magnitude of the people you can reach out to on a social media platform tends to really affect the value of it. So things like social media would probably be a slower death, but it's still the same thing. It's just slower. In a free market, you have to provide a value to your customer. You have to provide them with something that they want more than the money in their pocket. Whatever that money is worth to that person, because money is worth different things to different people at different times. If I have X amount of money and that X amount of money provides me and my family a good home-cooked meal, comfort level of whatever, a pretty good comfort level for that week. And then I can do this, and then my family's comfort level comes down X amount, right? That's what money is. It's you're evaluating the worth of it. It's not, money means nothing except for what you can get with it in today's society. You can't trade it in for gold. There's no other money that you can get. And even if you could trade it in for gold, Bitcoin, whatever, it's still only worth what you can get for it. Okay? So like Bitcoin, as much as we talk about how good it is, if I can't get anything with Bitcoin, it's not worth anything. It's a medium of exchange. It's not having $2 isn't having $2. Having $2 is having a sucker, like a blow pop today. Having $2 when I was riding my bike to the store, you could get a whole fucking box of blow pops. 10, 12, 13. You could have a bunch of them for $2 back then. That's the difference. That's what I'm talking about. The blow pop is the same. Okay? So like the blow pop didn't change. The price of the blow pop is the same. The value of your money changed. I think people need to realize that. Especially when we're talking about monopolies and things like this, because like monopolies have to be like, the whole point to a monopoly is to be like the Federal Reserve, where there's laws that force you into sticking with it and whatnot. And then because now, like, because the Federal Reserve printing money, they could print tons of counterfeit money US dollars, nobody used US dollars, it wouldn't fucking matter. They wouldn't actually get to steal our wealth because we don't hold any US dollar. So they could print tons of them. It wouldn't be like it is today where, I have $10 and I can pay my rent. Let's just imagine I can pay my rent with $10 today, but then I have $10 a month from now, and it costs me $11 to pay my rent. It's the same fucking house, same fucking rooms. It's just the value of the dollars went down. And people need to start saying that instead of the rent went up. I think if people would start saying it right, they would click in their fucking heads. We're sitting here talking about monopolies, and I think it should have more meaning than I thought of that shit before you did. I think there's more to a monopoly than that. I'm doing it first. I think that's just called doing it first.
It's a trap, and there's no comfort fitting in.